Awesome. Jocelyn, you teed up a key question. What does it actually look like when a state builds one of these lists? Eric, we're excited to have you today, and even more excited for you to take us under the hood a bit. How do states decide what is going on these lists? What do we mean when we talk about a list being a garden versus a rose bush? And how does EdReports fit into this picture?
You bet. I think in that question, I may have overplayed my hand as a good gardener. But thank you, Josh. And I'm excited to build off of some of the great points Jocelyn made. First off, for those of you who don't know Ed Reports, we celebrated a decade of our first reports coming out. We are a nonprofit that works with educators to identify quality materials to help districts and states make hard decisions around both what they adopt as well as potentially serving as the backbone for some of these state lists. If you go to the next slide, we're really excited about the impact we've had over this past decade. We've published over 1,100 grade and course level reports across K-12 math, ELA, and science and pre-K coming. We've been used in districts serving over 20 million students, and we're really proud of that bottom stat that over 40 publishers have utilized our reviews to affect change in their materials, which helps all of these lists and helps all of these students. If you go to the next slide, when I think about the difference between a Louisiana and a Massachusetts, there's the policies that undergird the building of a state list really matter. So, a few of the things that can either constrain or catalyze a broad or a narrow list are really baked into state policies and regulations. So, for example, some state policies, Jocelyn, you referred to this, they may be an adoption state looking at all subject areas. They may have very specific regulations or pieces in statute that determine who does a review, how long they can take, participation, or some may have been built more recently in science of reading lists. We also see a lot of variation in states depending on whether building the list is a penultimate goal versus whether it's one of several pieces as part of a high quality instructional materials strategy. Ideally, states are building from teacher preparation all the way through implementation and ongoing support in a coherent way. And that may really get at how expansive or how constrained a list may be. State capacity and infrastructure really matters. We can tell you at EdReports, creating a list on your own can be a harrowing challenge. You have to find educator time or expert time, getting these materials, going through these pieces, and really creating the criteria you want to evaluate against can be very, very challenging. And finally, as part of that, there are always political and funding constraints. I was just reading, for example, in my inbox this morning, that Texas put $174.69 per student for materials and technology. And Tiffany and Mickey, I know you don't have that kind of per student funding for materials buying in your state. All of these come together for this first point on this slide, which is these state lists can serve two specific purposes that often they don't work counter, but they do different things. The first is to constrain choice, and this gets to the garden analogy. Thanks, Josh. That ultimately, are you trying to basically weed out materials in which evidence and design may be things a state does not want districts to pick up? They're saying, hey, local districts, there's some things that we want to take off your selection. And or are they meant to signal quality? So you really care what flowers are being planted in this garden. It's not just we want to see flowers. You may want roses. You may want a specific flower depending on those state policies and regulations. If you go to the next slide, there are real ramifications for what a state chooses to do in terms of this broader notion where you're going to have more materials and your goal is to weed out things that you think may be harmful. And in having a narrower list where you're really trying to channel choice towards a smaller set of materials. The primary benefit of that smaller list is the ability to really think about an HQIM policy at the state level that really allows specific implementation and professional learning support that I know Annie will talk about. But the real challenge in doing that is if you have varied districts with varied context, it can get really challenging to ensure that your list has enough options that really meet the contextual needs of every district. I'd also like to be clear, there are some materials that make one set of lists or others. There's one state that did not include a set of materials in their list of 27 that a state with 5 materials actually put through. So these really do vary material by material. If you go to the next slide, let me just say a little bit about us, which is oftentimes we are utilized, as is in the case of Massachusetts, for our reviews. When we started, this is not how we started. We started by saying there is a real need to make an opaque or translucent market much more transparent. And by having educator-led independent reviews, that we put out there for free and for use, we're really excited that these have served in a positive way for states and excited for Tiffany and Mickey to talk a little bit more how they have utilized our reports skillfully. I'd like to really make the point that when we put out these lists, we work on our criteria and we put all of this out transparently from our tools and evidence guides to very long reports, that we know these are a place for states to start and for district to make informed decisions and states to make informed decision based on their own goals, their own priorities, and their own requirements. Before turning it over to Tiffany and Mickey and back to you, Josh, I know Tiffany and Mickey are going to answer some of these questions, but here are some real key things that I hope those who are from states or influencing states are thinking about. One is just being clear what you can do versus what you have to do. Again, where is a department going to come in and really set goals and be able to do work that gets high quality instructional material in more student and teachers' hands. And sometimes states do not have the luxury of doing what they may want to do because, again, the legislature sets someone else. Being clear about, and Jocelyn, you made this point really well, are districts required to select from this list? What's the point of the list in the first place? And do you change that list through appeals, waivers, ongoing communication with your districts? Jocelyn, you already made this point. In the end, making sure there is some monitoring of this list and whether anything has been selected from it is going to be really important. And the last piece, and I know Mickey, you'll talk about this, a list is a regulatory piece. Again, it says you can only pick from this, but what are you doing to really incentivize uses? There are other ways to get folks to pick high quality instructional materials. And the last point I'd make, and it'll feed into Annie's part, a list is about materials as designed. And Jocelyn, you brought up that RAND data, which came out last week. Teachers are already using 2 core curriculum and 5 supplements on average. Only about half of teachers use aligned materials regularly, and only 1/3 of teachers reported using commercially provided things, which could be on this list, more than 75% of the time. The list is about materials as designed unless you focus on implementation and support. I don't know how much the list matters.
Thank you, Eric, for that really helpful foundational information around how state lists come together. I'd love to bring in some state perspectives on this topic. And we have with us Dr. Kiffany Pride from the Arkansas Division of Elementary and Secondary Education. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Pride. And I'm curious, Arkansas is one of only a few states that require districts to choose ELA curriculum from the state approved lists. How did you build that list and how has it evolved over time?
Wow, thank you, Joshua, for the invite and for that question. And I would say that in Arkansas, we've had a journey around our list of high quality instructional materials. In the very beginning, we started with our own list and we vetted that list ourselves. We had an entire process around it. But I would share with anyone, like, that is a huge undertaking. And we quickly realized like the capacity to do that was harder for us. And when we were introduced to EdReports as a resource, we took that opportunity to codify that rubric to meet Arkansas needs and to begin to develop a process that included EdReports vetting materials for us. And then we have a secondary process by which we look specifically for 3Qing because in our state, 3Qing is certainly disqualifies any program to be used because we're relying heavy on evidence-based research and how to teach students to read, and we believe in the science of reading. And so we have a two-step process in order to develop our current list of core materials. But yeah, we went on a journey. And we found what we believe to be the just right fit for us to build a good list for our districts to be able to choose what is best for them. Because we are, again, as you've all mentioned, many states have local adoption, but we want to be able to communicate what is quality and to signal to our schools the options that they have and what that means for them.
Thank you. That information is super helpful. I want to ask, and just a quick follow up on that kind of local autonomy piece. You've obviously had to manage kind of the state requirements versus local control or local autonomy to strike that balance. What advice would you give to other states who are trying to thread that needle?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say, what was really key for us in our strategy is to communicate, the why and the purpose, and also like the benefit of really having, I would say, an interdependent relationship around signaling quality. And I would always advise that people spend lots of time communicating. We went on sort of, I would say, a listening tour, and we communicated with each region in our state, and we took feedback. And one of the other things that we did that was really key, I think, and critical to our strategy was we did a survey of our teachers to really get an idea of how they felt about preparing for teaching and learning and what they found to be important. And it was pretty evident. We did a 10,000 teacher survey, which was a great sample of our teachers in our state. But it was pretty clear from teachers that they wanted quality materials. They were spending way too much time preparing on their own. So I would recommend that you hear from your teachers and connect to their needs around quality materials and also show them their options and their autonomy around choosing materials, quality materials.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pride. We really appreciate the perspective. We'd love to bring in another kind of state level point of view, and we're very lucky to have Mickey Ray Marinelli joining us from the Kentucky Department of Education. Mickey, Kentucky has taken a slightly different approach, but has also made some really big changes in state. Can you tell us a bit about your new state lists and the role that things like the Instructional Resource Consumer Guides and SB 207 have played in making this work for your districts?
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh, and good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you today, speaking to the work that's happening in Kentucky around signaling quality of high quality instructional resources. As Josh mentioned, we have very similar to Dr. Pride in the Arkansas story. We have been on a journey, and our journey in a very targeted way began back in 2020. And so we wanted to be able to support local districts in increasing access to grade level learning. And our theory of action, sort of our foundational belief, is that increased access to high quality instructional resources for both teachers and students is a great support to ensuring that not only is the materials aligned to our academic standards, but they will create more vibrant, engaging experiences for students as a result of the grade level learning that is housed within those instructional resources. And so initially, we really became students. We did a lot of partnering with EdReports to understand their rubrics, to understand the process that goes into vetting resources. And we did just this last year publish a K through 12 approved list for reading and writing resources, as well as a K through 12 list for mathematics. And so our list is meant to, it's kind of a balance. It is meant to sort of weed out some materials that are not aligned to the evidence basis that's supported by our legislation, our Kentucky Read to Succeed Act, which is our sort of seminal literacy legislation, as well as our more recent Numeracy Counts Act. And so that was really the guiding force around that. And the list is a first step. So we do have flowers on the list. But we wanted to be able to support local districts in evaluating even, 2 to 3 resources they might identify initially from that list. So the consumer guides, they do a much more in-depth process of focusing on the markers of quality for that particular content area that should be reflected in the resources. But another big part of this, we know and acknowledge that districts have local priorities and key initiatives around portraits of a learner work and competency-based work that they have happening in association with some of our United We Learn initiatives within Kentucky. So we felt very strongly that they needed the support and the empowerment to be able to investigate and select the resources that most align to their local priorities as well. So within those instructional consumer guides, there are tons of tools for them. And I think later in the presentation, you'll have access to some of these links. And so we have vendor questions, we have stakeholder engagement surveys and other questions just to ensure that everyone, as Dr. Pride mentioned, really has a voice in the process and that they can feel that they are invested in the resource that is ultimately selected. Another thing that we're doing in connection to Senate Bill 207 that you mentioned. So Senator Steve West was the sponsor of that legislation. And sections 11 through 29 it's a very powerful piece of legislation because it's updating many of our antiquated state textbook statutes that were currently on the books in our state. So it has allowed us to move forward and really modernize the work that we're doing around the selection of high quality instructional resources in the current marketplace. And so really excited to be able to advance not only state policy, but what's happening in practice to be able to support districts in having funding around the adoption of resources and have access to the supports and guidance that need to be in place to really move their selection process forward.
Nikki, thank you so much for kind of sharing what that process has looked like in Kentucky. For a brief follow-up question, real quick, I'm curious, what has feedback to this plan and this course of action been like? What have you heard from folks on the ground, teachers, other system leaders? What's some of the feedback that you've gotten on this course of action?
That's a great question. So we have had very positive feedback, even around the creation of the state-specific list. We work with a quality curriculum task force that informs what lives on the list and what is included in all of the guidance and the consumer guides and other resources. And another part of this are grants that we have in place across the state. Our Read to Achieve grant, we have numeracy grants, and a part of the KYCL, which is is a part of the federal grant programming, I think leaders feel that it is much more efficient and much more helpful to them to have some healthy guardrails around the resources that are selected so that they can have confidence that what they're looking at is aligned to our academic standards and has had external validation.
Fantastic. It's really inspiring to hear such great work happening in both Kentucky and Arkansas. Thank you for sharing your perspective on the development of your state lists. We want to kind of transition and take a look at how states reinforce vetted materials lists with high quality PL provider lists as well. And in the ways that professional learning is provided and supported for teachers implementing curriculum choices. To speak to PL development and lists, we have Annie Morrison from Rivet Education joining us. Annie, thank you so much for being here today. We know curriculum is just one part of the equation. Professional learning matters a lot, especially when it's curriculum based and aligned with what's being implemented. Can you walk us through how some states are supporting this and how vendor marketplaces and standards can play a role?
Yeah, Josh, happy to. And before I do that, just quickly a quick introduction to Rivet for those of you on the call who may not know us. So at Rivet Education, like everyone that you've heard from so far today, we also believe that high quality instruction materials have the power to transform educational experiences for students. And our work really revolves around addressing the challenges that education systems also often face as they're implementing those materials. So specifically, we provide support to states and school districts on providing a roadmap through our instruction materials implementation tool for high quality curriculum implementation. So really defining who should be doing what and when along the journey. We evaluate professional learning providers through our professional learning partner guide so that state and district leaders have a vetted list of proven providers who can service high quality instruction materials. And we also just create simple and practical resources to smooth your path for implementation and accelerate progress. And our work really comes from our experience working at the Louisiana Department of Education. So both my partner and I both were there with the agency as we launched Louisiana Believes, and we're there to support our work around helping school districts adopt high quality instruction materials. We created our own list in 2013 to point our districts to high quality materials. And we immediately saw success. By 2015, nearly 80% of our school districts had adopted a high quality math curriculum. And that year we saw the NAEP results show that. We saw progress on our math NAEP results. But shortly after that, we started to hear and see progress stagnate. And when we started going into classrooms, what we were seeing was teachers really struggling. And when we were talking to teachers and talking to school leaders, what we heard was just these materials require a fundamental shift in teacher practice. Our teachers were like, this looks nothing like what I was taught in my ed prep program. This looks nothing like what I learned in my own in school in my own educational experience. And so we realized we needed to do something to help support implementation. And again, recognizing that local control was a thing in our state, we also wanted to, again, smooth that path towards implementation for our school districts. And what we realized is that there's several different strategies that we could enact to support implementation. So Josh, if you go to the next slide. And those are, you can create a vendor marketplace where you identify and monitor high quality providers and incentivize your districts to partner with them. You can leverage regional service centers. In Louisiana, we didn't have traditional regional service centers, but we had networks that served as like regional hubs where you train the staff of these regional service centers to support adoption and implementation of HQIM. And so that they are providing direct support or even direct curriculum-based professional learning to the districts that they service. You can train educators directly. We did this by hosting the Teacher Leader Summit. And we provided direct training to teachers and leaders on Eureka Math or our guidebooks, which were some of like our identified high quality curricula at the time, so that teachers were getting direct training from the SEA. And then finally, you can train the trainer. So we created teacher leaders and content leaders who served as experts in their building. We trained them on their curricula, and then they were responsible for providing that training in their buildings. So there's a number of strategies that you can pull to really support curriculum implementation. And again, we pulled all of these levers in Louisiana. So these are not mutually exclusive. It is likely that state agencies will leverage a combination of these things. And you'll hear a little bit from Making Kentucky, who, they're like leveraging a vendor marketplace and also working and leveraging their regional service centers. And also hear from Arkansas how they created a vendor marketplace. But you can, leverage any number of these to achieve your goals. But today we're going to focus on the vendor marketplace. And one thing that's helpful, Josh, if you go to the next slide to mention, is that when you're creating a vendor marketplace, it's important to have a bar for quality. Oh, sorry, next slide, Josh. I think these got a little bit out of order. My apologies. Or maybe skipped one. There we go. It's important to have a bar for quality in the same way that EdReports and their reviews sets the bar for high quality materials. We created the Professional Learning Partner Guide to serve as the standard for high quality curriculum-based professional learning and our framework that serves as the foundation for our evaluations for that tool. And the PLPG also serves as just a national vetted list of professional learning organizations. So that can really support the adoption and implementation of HQIM. And we know that finding the right partner and creating this vendor marketplace is hard work. So the Professional Learning Partner Guide really aims to mitigate that uncertainty by making sure that like all of the professional learning providers that are featured within it undergo a rigorous review process by a team of expert reviewers from across the country. Many of these are people like you in positions as PL supervisors or curriculum supervisors, CAOs in school districts. They're charter leaders, they're state leaders, and they are the ones conducting these reviews. And so, this guide again just serves as that vetted list and that bar for quality. And if you can go to the next slide. Okay. And so I think again, as Eric pointed out a little while ago, that deciding which option and which leverage to pull for your state will depend on a number of factors. And so here we've outlined kind of what some of those like main three options that a lot of states choose to pull when creating a vendor marketplace and some of the rationale behind that. So the first is, again, you can just point to our national guide. This is a free tool. There's no fee to use it. It's freely accessible on Rivet's website. So if your state approved vendor list, curriculumist is EdReports. If your PL standards are similar to Rivet's framework for curriculum-based professional learning and our PLPG rubric, and there's really like no external factors like policies or politics that really play a factor in why you might need a specific list for your state. Then pointing to the national PLPG is the way to go. So there's states again like Kentucky, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Nebraska, New Mexico, and Rhode Island that all choose this option. The other option is to create a state-specific PLPG, where if you have an HQIM that might look a little bit different than EdReports, or there's some external factors that warrant a custom state-specific PLPG, again, like some politics that may be at play or state policies, then you can create your state version of our national PLPG, where Rivet is still conducting the reviews on your behalf. Because just like creating a state adoption list, creating your own vendor list is a ton of work. So we always recommend that, like, you probably, if you're going to create that list yourself, there needs to be really good reason for doing so. So creating a state-specific version creates that like state-specific feel, but reducing the lift. And then the final version is there are reasons why you should go and create your own vendor guide. And you could do so either using Rivet's rubric as the foundation for those reviews, but conducting those reviews yourself, or creating your own rubric that is a modified version of it, or start from scratch. And again, the reason for going this route is typically that your state list is significantly different from EdReports, or your PL standards are significantly different from Rivet's framework, or there's some significant external factors. For example, in Delaware, they have a state policy that says if the state produces a vendor list, districts can partner with any provider on that list, and they don't have to adhere to their district procurement rules. So there's a huge financial incentive for Delaware to create its own list, and they have done so. But rather than me, telling more about how states like go about making these decisions, I'd love to turn it over to our friends in Kentucky and Arkansas to kind of share why they made their decisions to go the route that they did for their vendor marketplace.
Thanks for that overview, Annie. Super helpful. And I know that we have kind of a list of Rivet education resources that we'll put up towards the end here, or just make sure it gets sent out to participants. Mickey, I'm curious to get your perspective on this out of Kentucky. How is Kentucky signaling what's good and what good PL looks like? And how are you helping district leaders ask the right questions?
Thank you, Josh. So we know that the adoption of that resource is really just the first step. And so I can't state the significance enough of curriculum-based professional learning. And so what we've done in Kentucky, we have defined high quality professional learning, and we have a guidance document that supports districts around the rationale and purpose for curriculum-based professional learning, as well as other helpful tools. And as part of that guidance, we do point to the National Rivet Partner Guide. And the reason for that is, this is a significant investment in resources, and school and district leaders want effective implementation. They want a return on that investment in terms of the student experience. And so in order for that to happen, we need them to know and to be able to partner with quality providers of curriculum-based professional learning. And so we've been able to incentivize CBPL, as we call it, in all of our grant programming. And schools and districts are able to look at that Rivet Partner Guide, as well as we do have some state level work that is moving. We have one organization, EPIC, in our state, who is really working to provide quality curriculum-based professional learning, not only in the launch phase, but with coaching partnerships. And so part of our approach has been able to build the capacity of our regional cooperatives. We're part of a pilot program that's really making an investment in their ability to help districts self-monitor implementation, be able to identify the strengths that they have in implementation, no matter what phase they are in, whether it's launch, early, or ongoing implementation of that HQIR. And it's been really powerful to see our cooperative partners really lean into this work and become students of it, just as what we have done at the KDE as well. And so just grateful for the Rivet Partner Guide, grateful for being able to signal quality, not only in terms of the resources, but in the significant professional learning that must be in place to support teachers in implementing the resources effectively.
I really appreciate that perspective into Kentucky. Dr. Pride, curious on that Arkansas perspective as well. We know you created your own vendor marketplace in the state. What did that look like? And what kind of supports are district leaders asking for most from the state team?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. In Arkansas, we were really leaning in, around the skillful use of high quality instructional materials. And we wanted to really be able to build capacity in our districts. We are largely rural. And so we know that our districts needed support, and we wanted support that was through year. But I think even more importantly, we were really wanting to make sure that we had a vendor market that specifically understood the context of Arkansas and the work we were doing in this area, one around our policy around use of HQIM and selection of that. And we wanted to have vendors that we knew could also support, our academic standards. We are not Common Core. We don't have Common Core state standards. We have very specific academic standards. And so we wanted to be sure that, our partners understood that it could work with our schools around our academic standards. So alignment was really key for us. We did cast a wide net. Like we We incentivized around this. We had some pilots around this work. We made sure that our regional partners, as Mickey said in their state, that our regional partners were set to support districts because we wanted to make sure that teachers had what they needed to really be able to support their vision and mission around teaching and learning. And we know teachers need support. Materials are deep, they're wide, they take time to learn because there are so many pieces. So we really wanted to set forth our vision around it and support districts in their vision around implementation. So I would say we wanted great partners in the work that we believe in here in Arkansas.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Pride. We really appreciate those state perspectives. We do want to engage the audience a bit and answer some questions that we've received during today's discussion. So first, I'm going to ask Jocelyn to tackle our first question up, which is looking at the mandated use of lists, particularly from Florida's perspective.
Yeah, in terms of that, great question about Florida in the Q&A box. It's one of these states where I had mentioned in my overview that even when a state has a required list, there's frequently a process by which a district can apply to use a different curriculum that might not be on that list. And Florida is one of those cases. So we'll put a link in the chat to the source. That's the actual Florida code that talks about what that process would look like. It's a pretty significant set of requirements if a local school board wants to take this on their own. The state has a pretty strong point of view of what that should look like, and that district level review process has to include a parent. It has to, of course, be standards aligned. So it's essentially saying districts, you can choose from our list, or you can do this pretty significant process and choose your own.
Excellent. Thank you, Jocelyn. I would invite the rest of the panelists to come off cam or to come on camera and help us tackle a couple of questions that we received today. So the first one, I'll open up. Anybody feel free to jump in and respond. We've seen cases like Steubenville, Ohio, where a district's instructional approach was working for students, but a certain program wasn't on the state list. Mickey and Tiffany, starting out, how do you think about exceptions? When is it appropriate to support something that's off the state list, and what does that process look like? Great question.
I don't mind to kick that one off, and then we'll yield to Dr. Pride for sure. But for me, that was a very specific instance. That resource, it in Kentucky, we have a published list of Tier 1 core comprehensive resources. And so in that case, that resource was more for school improvement. So it would never really qualify for inclusion on our approved list. But that being said, we do have a process. It's called the off-list notification process. Very clever term there, terminology. And so what we allow districts to do, because we want to encourage folks to be innovative, but we want to also ensure that it is aligned to the evidence basis. And so for off-list notification, districts bear a greater burden to show us and to work with the vendor to show us the alignment to the Kentucky academic standards, as well as to have evidence of external validation beyond just the vendor itself. And so we have been able to move forward to include some different resources as a result of that process. And I feel like it is functioning effectively in our state.
Yeah, Mickey, you did a good job of that. I'm glad you went first. But I would say we in Arkansas also have a similar process by which districts can submit a rationale for use of a program that we may not have on our list. But again, it is on the district to provide something, rational to why would you want to include that on your list. And so we go through a process for that. We've done that for years since the very beginning of our list, even when we were vetting materials ourselves as an initial process into this process that we have now with EdReports. So districts have that process, that road to ask us for inclusion of something on the list, but definitely the onus to prove why should it be there, and to make sure that it aligns to our policy and the practices that we know are important for students to learn to read or learn mathematics or even to think like a scientist with science. So same process.
I think one of the neat parts of what you said, Tiffany, gets into this notion of use. Annie, you called out Delaware. I think I saw some Delawareans. I don't know if that's the right term for someone from Delaware, but I'm going to go with it. That they utilize as part of their appeals process information on professional learning and implementation. So, in fact, if a district is going to go off list, one of the things they have to talk about is this notion of how are you going to implement it to potentially address some of the deficiencies that may have kept it off the list, and what is your support plan? Because again, as we talked about the data in the beginning from Rand, not many folks are utilizing the materials exactly as designed. So it really almost gets at both the use and the design together in a really interesting way. So good job, Delaware, as well as Arkansas and Kentucky.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for answering that question so thoughtfully. We have a couple other questions that have popped up. First is, what kind of supports are districts most frequently asking for right now around curriculum and PL? What are the most common requests for support that districts are sharing right now, if any?
I can take that one first, Josh. So what we're seeing is um, the requests are more of that ongoing support piece. So I think a lot of schools and districts are doing a good job of providing that initial training because a lot of time it comes with the purchase of the curriculum, right? And a lot of these publishers have really ramped up the quality of their professional learning that they're providing for that initial launch. And we're seeing that through our reviews in the PLPG. But unfortunately, for different reasons, there isn't that ongoing professional learning plan in place to support implementation in the long term, specifically around job embedded professional development. So, if I'm a teacher using CKLA, that initial workshop I got was probably sufficient to get me maybe through my first unit. But I'm inevitably going to struggle probably throughout the year. And if I don't have common planning time once a week with my third grade peers, or an instructional coach that I can go to for her help, I'm going to be in trouble. So a lot of the support that we see districts really asking for is more of that job embedded ongoing support, which is one of the reasons we recently added a coaching and collaborative planning filter to the PLPG. So if you're specifically needing coaching support from these PL providers or specifically needing help setting up PLCs and running effective PLCs, you can now see which providers are really strong in those areas.
I agree with that. I just want to jump in and just sort of stamp that as well. In our state, we are trying to really make part of our common vocabulary through year professional learning, right? And that it shouldn't be like a beginning of the year or end of the year, but it should be a planned sequence of professional learning, curriculum-based professional learning that is in the classroom with the teacher. And so, we have stressed that with our partners, like, yeah, we value collaborative pieces, but that's not just it, right? Like it's not going to just be the end all of the professional learning. Like you need to be alongside the teacher. That means different things for teachers in the coaching continuum. But whatever that means for that teacher or school, we need that to be available and strategically designed for that particular school. And we've really empowered our regions to be able to support schools as they are engaging with vendors, really focusing in on outcomes-based contracting with vendors to make sure that the outcomes that the schools are desiring and their best hopes for how teaching and learning happens in their schools are achieved, right? And so we have really seen a lot of ask around that, and we have been more than ecstatic to provide guidance and support throughout our region directly from the state, however it needs to come. We're here to support our schools.
Fantastic. I really appreciate everyone joining today. I really appreciate the multiple layers and levels of perspective that you all brought to this conversation from the ground up. Recognizing time and that this hour passed by extremely quickly, and that's because we're having so much fun. I do want to close us out with kind of the takeaway that you would love the audience to walk away with and not forget. So I'd love to kind of go around the horn here. Jocelyn, would love to start with you. But what is the one thing each of you really hopes audience members walk away remembering after today?
Mine is just state support matters. I have the privilege of getting to interview state leaders, folks on this call, obviously, and others, and talk to people doing the work. And having worked for the US Department of Education, it's like, don't touch curriculum, don't touch curriculum. People want support. And so I think busting some of these myths around it being prescriptive or putting people into a box, no, it's really giving people options. We all know how strapped district leaders are, especially today. And having that backstop, having that foundation of a place where you can go and have some trusted materials, guidance, support really makes a difference for folks on the ground. So mine is state support matters.
Eric, would you like to go next?
Sure. Um, State lists matter, but use matters more would be my bumper sticker. Ultimately, being clear on the why, Tiffany, Mickey, you are so clear on how the list fits within a broader strategy to improve instruction in your states, and it is amazing and admirable. So we know that virtually no teachers use their materials out of the box with complete fidelity as design, nor should they necessarily. So again, situating the list in a broader vision that gets to change instruction, which has to get at use and support, is really important. Last piece to remember is our 2.0 reviews come out next week. It will have multilingual learner data, and you will see some innovations, 3Qing covered in that, Dr. Pride. And you will continue to see more innovations to come. So that is not quite a bumper sticker, but thank you.
Awesome. Love it. Dr. Pride, can we go to you next for your takeaway?
Yeah, I was really trying to think of something clever to say, but I'll say this. That, a lesson I've learned and I think is really key is like, we started with our message just around HQIM, but I would encourage everyone to start with like HQIM and HQPL like in the same breath because you need a plan from the very beginning to support teachers once they adopt materials. And, we were a little slow on that. We communicated a lot about HQIM, but I would say HQIM and HQPL, or you may call it curriculum-based professional learning, they are a pair. And that is the strength in adopting materials is also having a plan around it. And if you're trying to run the race a little faster, I would pair those together a little bit quicker and we learned that lesson and we're on track and we're ready. We're running the race to student success. So thanks.
I appreciate that. Mickey, could we get your takeaway for the day?
Yes, thank you. I think I want to acknowledge that this is really challenging work. It can be messy, but the takeaway I hope would be that the time and energy and focus, certainly as having the privilege of being able to support a state in that work is so worth it. It's worth it for teachers. It is absolutely worth it for students, and anything that we can see to promote growth in that area is important and impactful. So it's worth it.
Thank you, Mickey. And certainly, last but not least, Annie, what would be your takeaway for the day be?
Mine for SEAs would just be embrace your role as a change agent. Do not let local control really like hinder your ability to influence change in your state, which kind of builds off of everything that everyone has said. Our motto in Louisiana was to make the right choice the easy choice. And so I think that really, again, you have the power to really make the road towards high quality instruction materials implementation a smooth one or a very bumpy one as a state agency. So really embrace that role and figure out how you can influence change and progress.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. So we are at the end of our time, but I am not kicking anybody off. We have some really, really great questions in the Q&A. And panelists, I hope that you all are able to see those and have been checking those out as they come in. If there are any questions that you would like to answer live now as a panelist, please feel free to hit the answer live button in the Q&A function and let us know which question you would like to speak to. I also want to share that we're going to capture all questions asked today, and we're going to include those in a follow-up post on the Curriculum HQ website along with the webinar recording. So if your question doesn't get answered here live, you'll get an answer on the Curriculum HQ website here shortly. But do any of the panelists want to jump in? I'll be honest, I am very, very. Oh, Tiffany, I just saw you come off mute, please.
I saw one question in there about support for leaders, which I think is really important and something we've been focused in on. One of the things that we're doing now is we have cohorts of leaders who, and they volunteer for this, like this is something that they want to do. We work with them around observational tools, around the key levers, 5 impact areas that you can use in your strategies for school support, school improvement. So we have a cohort of principals that we're working with, and they're giving us key insights into the needs of leaders, whether they're novice, whether they've been in the profession a while and need support in recognizing quality implementation, and also how to set goals that make sense to really support their teachers.
A fantastic answer.
I'm happy to talk real quickly about the AI one, Josh.
Please,
We
please.
continue to learn, but we understand that educators who use materials are absolutely critical to our review process. So there may be some efficiencies gained. We continue to experiment. We've also thought a lot about AI in curriculum and what it means for standards mastery and continued innovation within curriculum. Those gears in terms of unpacking what is in a curriculum will change. The last thing I'd say is I hope as folks think about AI, they're also thinking about instructional coherence and any materials, whether they're tech or not. In the end, as I said during the first part, teachers on average are using 2 sets of core materials, 5 supplements, and almost every teacher utilizes some things they are creating through AI or not. How those come together for a coherent experience for kids and teachers, regardless of the AI piece, will be critical.
Thanks, Eric. And Mickey, I saw that you might be able to. Oh, I'm sorry, Annie. Would you like to speak to the AI question as well? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
nope. I was gonna.
Okay, fantastic. Mickey, we have a question in here around how states are looking at incentivization, particularly with federal kind of funding cuts and shifts. Would you like to speak to that?
So I would just say, I would look for ways to be able to utilize incentives on things that are funded through state level funds and state level appropriations as well. We are able to have, 2 different grant programs that are supported by state level funding, in which we have allowed for not only the adoption of high quality instructional resources, but also the curriculum-based professional learning that would be associated with that. The other thing I would say is to really potentially lean into networks or collaboration communities that you have with school and district leaders. Within our Kentucky Early Literacy Leadership Network, CBPL specifically has been an enormous focus of the content. And so now we're able to elevate district bright spots who will move forward as really the face of that work, and other districts are going to be able to learn from them, which is powerful.
Thanks, Mickey. And Annie, I think I totally cut you off. I'm so sorry.
No, 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 no. I was
No,
going to address
Josh,
the
it was
question
me.
about. No, it's fine. I was going to address the question about how do you like have a strategy for curriculum-based professional learning when multiple curricula are being used. And my recommendation here is that yes, teachers need like curriculum specific training, but there is like work that needs to be done at like the district and even state level to set the foundation and the enabling conditions for that work to happen. That is the place to start. So having clear expectations for what implementation of the curriculum should look like, whether regardless of what it is important, and clearly communicating those expectations to school leaders and teachers is important. Um, Making sure that your district policies don't hinder that curriculum. Don't have lesson planning policies that require teachers to create lessons when they already exist in the curriculum, right? Don't have grading policies that contradict what's happening in the curriculum embedded assessments. Like, if you do not have any time for teachers to collaborate at any point, either weekly or monthly, and you only have 3 workshop PD days a year, right? Like, those are the things that you should be looking at, especially when you're using multiple HQIM, to make sure that there is this coherence across the board and that all schools and all teachers are having the same opportunities to use those curricula effectively. And then the PLPG, again, you can filter by curricula. Many of our curricula serve 10, 15, even 20 plus curricula. So the chances are you can go into the PLPG, filter by the curricula that are used across your district, and you may find a set of PL providers that can service all. So you can bring one partner in who can provide support across the board as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for not only joining this webinar, but offering your time to respond to questions. We still have some great questions in the chat. We're going to pull those for a Curriculum HQ discussion. And so we'll get a chance to get folks' thought on that, and we'll share out with the recording and kind of the follow-up. But to everybody who stayed on with us till the very end, thank you so much for joining. We will have more information about other opportunities to have these really important discussions around materials and professional learning in the future. Please follow all of our organizations. You can get contacts and links on the registration page, or follow along at curriculumhq.org. Thank you for joining. We will chat again soon. Thank you, panelists.